Good morning. It's so nice to be here. My name is Ryan Doppelmayr. My pronouns are she, her, and I am a member at large on your board. I want to first let you know that Tuesday, if you don't know already, is the winter solstice. So that means a solstice spiral walk at our church. So you're welcome to join us in the UUCE parking lot or sanctuary. Hopefully the weather will cooperate. To celebrate this time of darkness and a return to the light. Soft music will be there to help us create a meditative space, and we will light candles as we move toward the center of the spiral. You're welcome to come for part of this event or the whole thing. Please wear a mask and dress warmly, and it will be a wonderful way to celebrate the holiday. I also want to thank everybody, especially Molly Mae Culligan, Judy Shaw, and Barry Broadbent, and everyone else who helped with the holiday bazaar yesterday. It was fantastic. Thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you. Thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you. Sorry. So many people made treats and crafts and kid craft bags, and so many people donated and then also purchased the items. I have my beautiful cozy cowl here that I got, and we've actually almost finished our fudge and our cookies that we ordered. We should have ordered more. So thank you, thank you, thank you for everyone who participated. It was a wonderful event.
Our chalice lighting today is from the words of Prayer for Living Intention by Reverend Joseph M. Cherry. If we have any hope of transforming the world and changing ourselves, we must be bold enough to move into our discomfort, brave enough to be clumsy there, loving enough to forgive ourselves and others. May we as a people of faith be granted the strength to be so bold, so brave, and so loving. And in this season of Advent, which is the 4 weeks leading up to Christmas, we also light our Advent wreath. As the Rutledge family lights the first candles we have lit on our 3 previous Sundays, we call to mind what each represents: hope, love, joy, and today we light the final candle representing peace. May peace enter into our hearts today. Thank you, Rutledges. We gather today in mindful celebration of the unlearning we have collectively done over these last many months. We gather today to share some of what we have unlearned and learned in the process of having our beloved conversations. We are so grateful that so many of you listened to the call to take part. And we are so thankful for all of you gathered here to take part in the service dedicated to that learning. Come, let us open to the joy of learning and loving in new ways.
Good morning. My name is Poppy Lockridge. My pronouns are she and her. This morning, our first short reading is from Dr. Brené Brown in her new book, Atlas of the Heart. Joy is sudden, unexpected, short-lasting, and high intensity. It's characterized by a connection with others or with God, nature, or the universe. Joy expands our thinking and attention, and it fills us with a sense of freedom and abandon. Our second short reading is excerpts from Karen Walrun's new book, The Lightmaker's Manifesto. Activism, when approached with an intentional mindset, is all about creating experiences of meaning. Activism means taking responsibility to find answers to the world's problems, dedicating yourself to a cause greater than your own interests. Activism doesn't require a faith home or a spiritual practice, yet activism can feel very spiritual in nature. Activism, rooted in meaning, helps fill the activist's purpose. And in the words of Viktor Frankl, joy necessarily follows.
Hello, everyone. Happy Christmas. Good Yule to you. Happy Sunday morning. I'm so glad to see all of you today. My name is Jen Youngsun Ryu, and I use the pronouns she and her. Today is indeed a joyful day of celebration, and I'm going to call it a commencement too. We are at the threshold of a great moment in this community's life, having finished something really big and on the brink of creating something really new and wonderful. Today is also an opportunity to thank Jennifer Hackett for her mighty efforts and her loving care as she shepherded the Beloved Conversations project here at UUCE. About 80 of you, almost a quarter of this congregation, signed up. And also, we could not have reached those numbers without Ryan Doppelmayr, who wrote a grant so that even more of us could join. Hallelujah! Yes! And the angels sang. Glory to Ryan, glory to Jennifer Hackett, glory to all of you who signed up. This whole thing started with a very simple question from Rev Lo and Jennifer. They asked, what can this predominantly white congregation do to prepare itself for its very first minister of color? And also to live more fully into the mission that it set for itself? And how can it prepare itself for powerful collective action to dismantle white supremacy? And so you all said you wanted to dismantle racism, you wanted to dismantle white supremacy, not only in the wider world, but you understood that you needed to do it first in here. I'm pointing to my heart. And then we could do it out there in Springfield, Eugene. We could do it within this community. Now, knowing that Asian Americans often get lumped into the honorary white category with little acknowledgement of our experiences of racial harm, I knew that this was a really important question posed by Rev Lo and Jennifer. Was there a way for this congregation to learn together the damaging impact of, we don't see color? Was there a way for individuals to learn about their own history of race consciousness and where it was still affecting them and impacting others? Well, Beloved Conversations was the answer, a program coming out of Meadville Lombard Theological School, which is our Unitarian Universalist Seminary in Chicago. This program was designed for us, for UUs, who are seeking to embody racial justice. I love that. Embody racial justice as a spiritual practice. Now, UUs, as you all know, have been working toward racial justice and to counter oppression and racism for a very, very long time. But in the last decade, there has been a profound shift, and I pray a lasting shift in the way that we engage this embodied practice. And the most impactful change that has allowed for this momentous time in our denomination's history, I think the most impactful change has been the number of Unitarian Universalists of color who now hold professional leadership positions within our denomination. Every year, more and more professional educators, professional administrators, music directors, religious educators, professors, and ministers are identifying as being part of a historically marginalized group. Unlike in the years past, these younger, brasher, bolder professionals coming up aren't coming to a predominantly white institution hoping to assimilate and fit in. They are coming to use the full authority of their positions. They're coming to exercise their power, and they are skillfully leading change so that, unlike their older colleagues, like me, they won't have to leave part of themselves at the door, lest they be offensive to the status quo. I'm so happy for this change. The other significant shift is the theological and the spiritual change. We're now grounding our work in collective liberation. Remember, none of us is free until all of us is free. And we are insisting that we're doing this work as a spiritual practice, grounding everything that we do. In other words, our doing, our protesting and our activism and our charity and our teaching and our learning, all that must come from a sense of being, of knowing who we are. Our being has to be anti-racist so that our doing will come from a place of integrity rather than guilt and performance. One very, very powerful spiritual practice is learning in community. That's a very powerful practice that kind of comes easily, I think, to Unitarian Universalists. Loretta Ross is a feminist, a public intellectual, and African-American leader for reproductive rights. She tells us that when people think the same idea and move in the same direction, that's a cult. But when people think many different thoughts and move in one direction, now that is a movement. I often call Unitarian Universalism a movement, a religious movement. When we learn together, when we study together, everyone has so many different ideas, right? Because we all see the world from a different angle. And this is how we transform ourselves, by considering the perspectives of others. And of course, this is then how we transform the world, by moving together in one direction, not thinking alike, right? Not being alike, not holding the same thoughts, but moving in that one direction. Last winter, the church leadership here created a statement of affirmation of the dignity of all people. It's right there on the front page of our website. It states a very clear direction of where we are headed. Quote, "This congregation is committed to being a church where people with marginalized identities, particularly Black, Indigenous, and other people of color, transgender, non-binary, and LGBTQI+ people, and people living with disabilities, all of them can bring their whole selves and experience full inclusion." I said yes to this church because you were so clear in stating where you're going. And you reached out to me and said, "This is where we're going. Do you want to come along?" And I said yes. And you know what? A whole bunch of other people said yes. And today we're going to hear from just 3 of them. I'm sorry, Connie, that we left you off the introduction earlier, but Connie Newman is with us in addition to Jason and Dana. Jason.
Good morning, beloveds. My name is Jason Dedrick. I use the pronouns he, him. And I really like greeting you as beloveds. This is how we were greeted online by our facilitators as part of this beloved conversation. And I always felt this sense of love and warmth being greeted that way. And so it may be a way that I start greeting people more often, in terms of just having love be part of a greeting was such a wonderful way to start this work. And that was really part of how I felt about this work, having done anti-racism training, including week-long immersive trainings as part of my work, I was doing this as head work, thinking it. And I really was interested in, that was part of kind of doing my job better and being there for the community. Beloved Conversations really gave me the opportunity to reframe this work as a spiritual practice. And I've often struggled with our faith as a creedless faith and wondered, what does a spiritual practice look like for me? And for me, it meant this work, this beloved conversation, and doing it with my heart, not just with my head. But that doing that kind of heart and spiritual work really opens one to vulnerability and means embracing messiness and pain and loss. But doing it as beloveds together in community provided a warmth and a connection that made it a lot easier. This work as a spiritual practice really juxtaposes the Christian faith of my childhood, where connection with God was really the spiritual practice, with the UU faith of my adulthood, where connection with others is truly the spiritual practice. Which is why doing this work as community was so meaningful to me and why I was so interested in doing Beloved Conversations. How wonderful it was to do it in community alongside my very own members of the congregation, as well as folks from around the country. I recall the materials mentioning that there's a fearful love and a courageous love, and that the latter is truly what is part of our faith tradition, a tradition that we are exploring together. I'm keenly curious about where our congregation is going on anti-racism work and how it informs who we will choose to be as a faith community. But I think that this helps us to take this journey together, this beloved conversation, a journey that includes establishing right relations with each other, just as much as with those less fortunate or who are experiencing hate or discrimination. This spiritual practice of beloved conversation, especially in my skin as a white man, meant facing difficult truths about both race and gender. Through Beloved Conversations, I've deepened my realization of how much of this work is rooted in power and privilege, that I have to face my own place in this work as a white man who has benefited from a system that my ancestors built to reinforce my place of privilege, that I must wrestle with the power of traditions that often uphold a white-dominated system, and to ask myself how I may be participating in upholding these. And for me, walking that path means relinquishing control and taking risks. One of the more profound and humbling realizations of this spiritual practice was naming the privilege associated with the choice to engage or not engage in the materials and attend the meetings and services. Some weeks I was too busy to get to the materials and the lessons as much as I would have liked. I struggled with the idea of one more on-camera meeting or more time staring at a screen after 6 to 8 hours of doing on-camera meetings all day for work. And that choice to not engage with the materials and anti-racism work is a choice people of color do not have to make. However, my imperfect participation was still perfect. So if you have not done Beloved Conversations yet, don't let that fear hold you back. Before I close, I wanted to share a few of the learnings that spoke to my heart this fall. The first was learning Bhangra dance from Gurdeep Ponder, a Sikh Canadian man, sharing the joy of his life and of this work simply by being joyful in nature and in community. Learning about the power and control wheel, which while related to abuse, informs my own privilege as a white man. Exploring Black joy, and also considering UU joy, and how my experience here at UUCE has not always felt as joyous as I would like. The bias of professionalism as coded language for white favoritism, an instance of which occurred the very same week that I encountered those materials. And also materials that made me ponder who my faith ancestors are and what kind of ancestor I want to be. This spiritual practice of this work helped me to vulnerably, lovingly, and in community face hard truths and begin to ask some hard questions. This was summed up for me in a poem by David White that was included in the materials, who also happens to be my favorite poet, titled Sometimes, about arriving at a place in the forest and that the purpose of that place is to trouble you with frightening requests. And in his words, requests to stop what you are doing right now and to stop what you are becoming while you do it. Questions that can make or unmake a life, questions that have patiently waited for you, questions that have no right to go away. Thank you.
Greetings. My name is Dana Dedrick, and I've been a member since 2007. My pronouns are she and they. Thank you for the opportunity to share a reflection on beloved conversations today. This is part of my commitment to faith formation, community building, racial justice, and collective liberation. I come to you today perfectly imperfect. I have not read all the readings for beloved conversations. I have not completed all the personal reflection questions. I did not complete even half of the resources made available. And yet I am complete. I'm brimming with love and joy and gratitude. Gratitude for this opportunity to take the course online. Gratitude to Rev Jen for calling us to this course. Gratitude for the creativity, competence, and wonderful humor of the teachers and facilitators in the course. Gratitude for all the little yeses people gave. Yes, let's meet in a learning pod together. Yes, let's watch this video and talk about it. Yes, let's each take a turn hosting. Yes, let's bring tea and muffins. And yes, let's question ourselves and what we think we know. So even though I showed up for every meeting of my learning pod unprepared, I learned a new way of being prepared. Showing up, having read or watched at least a couple things, and being willing to share and willing to listen. Ready to broaden my exposure, ready to seek understanding. Part of my journey in doing this beloved conversations course has come after completing the anti-racism workbook by Layla Saad, Me and White Supremacy, with my fellow staff in a local nonprofit, and also after finishing part of a decolonization series to learn about Indigenous histories and ways of stewardship with a broader network of my colleagues. I just said completed and finished. Ha. Of course, my work in learning and love is never finished. And because of that, I deeply thank Rev Jen for helping me see it is my greatest joy, not a great load of work. Joy to lean into greater understanding and hope for sharing for a brighter day. I've taken some things to heart I want to share with you. Gratitude is an anti-racist practice and a lovely way to start and end meetings where I'm in my learning zone. The learning zone is between my comfort zone and the zone where I'm overwhelmed. I like the learning zone. It's where I can be curious about my privilege and what would have happened in a whole bunch of instances in my life where I lost my temper if I did not present as a privileged person in this culture in terms of economics and in skin color. From my ancestry, when I trace my blood ancestors back, there are ones I can't find. They are dust now. Perhaps they're in the earth. Perhaps they're in the sedimentary rock all around me. I'm not sure if I would be proud of all my ancestors' actions, but exoneration is not for me to seek. That's not the question at hand. The question is, how will I live my life? Imperfectly. Imperfection is human. Our culture of perfection is a way to keep people down. I keep myself down with it. Definitely looking forward to unraveling that a bit. So I can feel. I have felt sadness, but relief in hearing that the work may not succeed, but it's the right work to do. It's a good use of time and energy. And I recall to be joyful in the effort. Certainly this is better for me than fear and grief. Joy. I feel joy hearing that we are already good as spiritual beings, but that it takes effort to do good in the world. And it can be small some days, like the practice of sharing. Sharing food and resources and skills, another great way to show up, and another great anti-racism practice. There's this core idea of a canoe that I heard in the decolonization course almost a year ago. And this image showed up on the cover of our UU World magazine this month. In this canoe are people of all types and colors. And the white people are not leading. They're not even the strongest paddlers, but they're in the boat paddling strong. This is the vision. In the Beloved Conversations course, the people with white skin color start the series together to work within. It strikes me that most of our congregation might be here, that our effort now is to paddle our boats to get to the place, to meet the canoes, where we can pursue joyful liberation together. I hope that even more of us in this congregation sign up for this course. I want to paddle with you toward that place because it will be easier in the future to be more inclusive, to make meaning together. A little story to end up. My work and heart is in the conservation of nature, ecosystems. I was in a conservation conference with many Black and Hispanic and people of color a few years back, and we were being challenged. Our conservation groups are very white. The main speaker, a Hispanic man, said to the 400 or so of us, "I bet you think you have to slow down to include us. Slow down and study up and learn." I froze. I slowly looked right at this keynote speaker, curious now. I felt he had reached into my heart and plucked that fear from me. Fear that I'll need to slow down in reaching my goals for nature. Slow down. Well, maybe some of more of what I love will get destroyed. But he said, "Don't you see? We're doing this already. We're already here. We're already doing the work of conservation and justice. You might need to relax and realize you're not in charge all the time and listen more, but you don't need to slow down in reaching big goals. In fact, you may see we'll all be speeding up by joining forces." This spoke to me because I realized my deepest love, the natural world, can only benefit from broadening my learning and connections to community. I'm grateful today that I am part of this congregation at this time. Here's a hope that we may feel the joy of relaxing, broadening ourselves, and reaching into a brighter world.
My name is Connie Newman, and my pronouns are she pronouns, and my ancestry on my mother's side comes from the Cahuilla people of California and from Mexico. And on my father's side, they're white folks from Europe, mostly from England. So a couple of years ago, the UUA suggested that everyone read a book called White Fragility. And I did that, and it was so good. And I recommended it to my book club that I'd been in for 25 years. And so the book club decided to read it. And I realized I didn't want to be there for that conversation, that everyone was white and that my being there would get in the way of an honest conversation there, I thought. I mean, that was my thought. And also that if I were going to talk about the things that moved me in that book, it would be, I would talk for the whole 2 hours. So that wouldn't have been good either. So I stopped going to that group and I went on reading similar things. All kinds of things were coming out because the whole country was reacting to the stories of the Black children, Black young men being killed by the police. And it happened every couple of months. It was happening again that we heard about, and probably more often than that. So many, many wonderful things were being written, and it was my privilege to read them. So, but I also missed having a group to talk to about it. So when Reverend Jen was going to come and we were all encouraged to sign up for the Beloved Conversations, I did that. I signed up for the BIPOC side of that. And I just want to tell you a little about how that was for me. My conversation pod in that program was 4 people. And there was me, and then there were 3 people with African ancestry. And we were separated by 3,000 miles on the east-west grid and 500 miles on the north-south. So it was a Zoom thing, and without being able to be in the same room together. Also, there was 50 years between our youngest person and our oldest person. So there were generational differences too. And they were really apparent when we talked about our assumptions about being bold, for instance, and about times that we stood up for ourselves or for someone else. We had wonderful discussions. I think the program is fantastic, and the encouragement in the online materials to go deeper, to have deeper conversations was exactly what I think we all needed. One of the things that we came back to a number of times was the concept of passing, and the reality of trying to pass for some people has been so destructive to say, to deny your family, to deny the culture that you came from, or at least some of your relatives came from. And there were tears, and there was frustration that we couldn't put our arms around each other and make it better. But the fact that we were able to speak to each other and be heard and be listened to in a really full way was vital and was a wonderful thing. For me, the conversation about passing, it wasn't my topic, but the more I thought about it and the more we discussed it, the more I thought about ways that the racism that I'd experienced through my life in various ways, how it had kept me back, how I had formed myself to not take certain risks and to try to fly under the radar and be in white groups and not be loud and obnoxious, just be quiet. And I think that when it's on a national level, on a cultural level, all these people damping down their true selves is such a loss for all of us. So one thing that we were encouraged to do was to get a shoebox and put things in it that were meaningful to us as we went through this program. And it could also be, what's that word? A portfolio. But we all decided we liked shoebox better. So I actually got a shoebox and I put things in. And I brought it today, but there were too many. So I just have my little. And I have also in there a book, a novel published by my uncle called Chicano, with some of his plot has to do with stories from our family. I have pictures, a little book of photos of my family. I have a magazine article I really like. I have a couple more musical instruments, a map. And it's just, it was really good. It was really good to put concrete things in a real box, not online, in a real box that I can open and look in and put more things in and close. So I, in the beginning, was resistant to doing things like that. It's not something I would think of doing myself. And in the end, it helped me grow. It helped me move to a better understanding of myself. So I'm grateful to the program for all that, also for encouraging us. We were all encouraged to find a critical friend who is someone that we could talk to, someone who we felt would be supportive. That worked out better for some people than for others. For me, the main struggle was being brave and asking the person that I knew would be glad to be my critical friend, but it took me like 2 months to make that request, just to reach out that way. And then it was great. So that was good. So I want to thank Reverend Jen for encouraging us all to do this. And I hope that anyone who didn't get to will in the future, because they will run the program again. I also want to thank her for encouraging, and Jennifer Hackett for encouraging us to form a BIPOC support group here and reading group here at UUCE, because I've been part of that, and it's been really great, and I've made some new friends that way. And also I want to thank the Corvallis UU Federation. They have an online, right now online, Indigenous study group, and I have gone deep into the horrible and appalling history of some of my ancestry. So it's good to know. It's hard to know when people keep saying, I can't read this, but we have to know. We have to have that knowledge in order to know what to do to go forward. Thank you.
Winter solstice is this week. The light will be returning. The light of understanding is open to all in an ongoing way. I have such gratitude for all of you who are able to participate in beloved conversations, and for those of you who plan to in the future, and for all of you who are doing this important work in various ways. We've learned that we cannot fight white supremacy culture out in the world until we have worked on it within ourselves, also among our church and beyond UUCE out into the world community. Many of you have inquired, what's next? How can you participate if you weren't able to this fall, or if you can participate again? Beloved Conversations offering of Within has distinct classes that occur every spring, which is different than the curriculum that occurs in the fall. So you can learn more, or you can take a break, or you can catch up with the same learning that we learned this fall. Right now, those who have taken part are taking time to reflect generally, or let the learning sink in, or to help others understand that it was not just preaching to the choir to do this learning. We are the choir and the listeners, each in turn. We are so grateful to Rev Jen, who helped us to answer the question of how to learn to be our most welcoming to her and to other people of color, now and in the future of this congregation, as we keep moving forward. And we are still supporting financially this effort for anyone who needs a boost. Just reach out to me to inquire about a scholarship, and you can visit the Beloved Conversations website, both of which are being dropped into the chat now, my email and that website. It'll tell you everything you need to know about the Within program. Thank you.
Thank you, Emma's revolution. So now it's time for Joys and Sorrows, and we're going to open this time with some words from G.E. Odell. We need one another when we mourn and would be comforted. We need one another when we're in trouble and afraid. We need one another in the hour of successes, when we look for someone to share our triumphs. And all our lives, we are in need, and others are in need of us. We invite you now to share the joys and sorrows that are in your hearts. The chat feature will now be open.
Thanks, Suzanne. It's been a wonderful combination of piano and organ and voices. Music has been really fun today, and lots of joyful praise in the chat for the music today. People are finding much joy these days, and so let us enter a spirit of prayer and rejoice together. O Spirit of life, amazing, wonderful life. We open our hearts today to courage and to joy. And we easily find joy this holiday season for family and friends, for twinkling lights, for sugar cookies, yummy treats at the bazaar. We're grateful to be able to reunite with family as we can safely. We are finding joy in the sound of the rain on the roof today, knowing that rain here means snow in the mountains and hopefully not such a dry summer. Joy, joy, even for a father's recovery from a stroke. Joy, even in the struggle, in the pain. Joy in the work. Joy in the opportunity that we get to be here in this work together. We get to be here side by side. We get to count on one another, ask each other for help, find assurance and inspiration from one another. For all the joys and sorrows that have been expressed today, and for all the ones that we keep in the silent sanctuary of our heart, I lift up in praise. I'm grateful that we are able to share our lives together with this community. May it always be so. Amen.
Our words for the chalice extinguishing are from Elizabeth Sell Jones. We extinguish this flame, but not the light of truth, the warmth of community, or the fire of commitment. These we carry in our hearts until we are together again.
And now, as you go out into this brand new day and into a festive week, may you remember that you are a beloved child of the cosmos. Your arrival into this life was just as sacred as the arrival of that other little baby. And the light that you carry is just as important to those whom you encounter. And so go out and offer that light to every single person that you meet today and in the days to come. Go in love, go in peace, everyone. Go in joy. Amen.